So not only did they give me information about the process, but they also helped me navigate the emotional process of working through that. And it became simple. I can do this because I'm talking to someone who has seen other people or themselves have gotten to the other side of that.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Fast Forward podcast. We are continuing our conversation on power. And as promised, I'm continuing with our guest speakers. We have talked about all kinds of power and even spoke about some villains in the power conversation. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit and speak about the power of community. Nobody thrives in power alone. Power is a communal source of activity. And I want to make sure that we understand what community can look like for both positive and negative, because the reality is it's on us to cultivate the community that we wish to see and benefit from. So there is no person that I could think of that would probably be better about this type of discussion than our guest today, who is Mr. Ryan Wilson. He is the CEO and one of the co-founders of the Gathering Spots. And this particular community has been a blessing to me, but we'll probably end up talking more about that in this conversation. But I want to give him a chance to introduce himself and tell us a fun fact about him. So, hey, Ryan, what's going on?
Well, hi, good to see you. I'm super excited to be here. So you asked me to do an introduction. So Ryan Wilson, I'm CEO and co-founder of the Gathering Spot. Fun fact. So I spend a lot of my time at work, but the most important thing to me is my family. I'm a father of two, and I'm a husband, and that's about as fun as it gets around here these days. So,
Yes.
uh, but
And your
you know,
family is so beautiful. So y'all, if y'all follow him on social media, you'll see them popping up on things. Gorgeous family, so inspiring. And I think that's actually a good place to start when we think about community, because community occurs in layers. So if you had to think about community for you, it sounds like you have almost like an onion of community. So the layers are, of course, at the deepest core, your nuclear family, which consists of your wife and beautiful children. And then I'm sure your other loved ones in your extended family. Where does work family fit into that? Like, how do you find layers for them to thrive in your life?
no, I think the way that you're describing it is exactly how I think about it, right? So my nuclear family, my wife and my kids, like that's where it starts. But and this isn't to say that these other parts of the onion here are not important. They are, right? But they just kind of occupy a different position in my life. So beyond that, I'd say that my extended family, I'm blessed to still have parents and my sibling sister. And then from there, the gathering spot community really is the next major layer. Right? I mean, I'm fortunate that my work every single day directly coincides with what I'm interested in, and so it's easy for me to stay grounded both professionally and personally because it, in my world, like they're really one and the same.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can notice about you right away is that because you have the support of your own family, both nuclear and extended, you can see how that shows up in the way the gathering spot was constructed, the events that we have, the ability for people to find themselves in the built environment. It's, you could tell it's a reflection of who you are and how you've cultivated. I know you've had events where you and your dad have spoken together, and I think it's your sister before too, where you all have had conversations. And so, for a lot of entrepreneurs, we may not necessarily have that. I know I don't always have that too. So to see that in other people, it's endearing because it lets me know what's possible and really my why for what I'm creating too. So I just want to say thank you for that, because again, I
I
don't always see it modeled
I
in my
appreciate it.
life, but it helps me to understand how to be the template to model it for future generations in what I'm building now in my company.
So I appreciate that. Seriously, I mean it's for me. It there are a couple of things, right? So it's hard to become something that you haven't seen before. I was fortunate that my parents are entrepreneurs, and I was able to see. And now I haven't started a business doing anything close to the businesses that they were in, right? But I was able to see the process, and that's been huge, right? And
Yeah.
the support that comes with people that just understand naturally what you're thinking about on a daily
Yeah.
basis. Let's say beyond that, I mean, everything that we do and the things that we care about to me comes from somewhere, right? Like
Yep.
it's fundamentally rooted in something. And that could be positive experiences or negative ones. I think that the thing that's important is to trace back what is the thing that is animating whatever it is that you're focused on, and then how do
Yep.
you use that knowledge to push yourself in the right trajectory. So
Yeah.
I've had the fortune of, again, of having friends and family that have been uh, familiar with this process.
Yeah.
But I've also, like everybody else, had parts of the journey that weren't as positive that do inform how I think about our work each day.
Yeah. Yeah. I like, so words stand out to me. So when you said that animated, I thought back to community because you're right. Sometimes you are running from what you've seen other people do, and sometimes you're running toward what you've seen modeled. But when I think about my journey, number one, that animation, what I've seen gives life to what I believe I can do. And then the other part of what you said is process. And I think that's where community becomes so important too, because it is steps in the journey. Like we are in this microwave generation about entrepreneurship. I don't know where this comes from, but everybody feels like all I need is a camera phone and an Instagram account, and I'm about to be a multimillionaire. And it's like, no, no, like it's so much more to it than that.
Unfortunately, not. No, I mean it doesn't work like that
No,
in my experience. But
it's a lot. Like even now, so I'm probably in one of the most difficult seasons of my life and my entrepreneurial journey. Um and the process, ironically, I've been able to navigate the process because of connections that I've made at the gathering spot.
I,
So
that's humbling for me. That's what it's here for, right? So like that's what it's here
yes.
for. And I think that there's also something really powerful in what you said, that if there's something that is defining this season for me, it's that we have to be very honest with one another. And that's not to suggest that we haven't been honest, but right. But I think this season especially requires a radical
Yep.
honesty, because
Yep.
in the absence of those sort of conversations, we start to believe that it's just us. Right. I was talking to an economist a couple of days ago, and I was talking to them about the fact that, like, inside of our ecosystem, there are a lot of businesses that just like this is a very difficult season, right?
Yep.
24 is not been as good of a year as 23 or 22. And he looked at me and he said, one that wasn't surprising, and that most economists expected that 24 not to be that great, which is its own conversation.
Right.
So,
So why y'all ain't tell us that?
uh, but but
So
the
why y'all ain't say
uh,
that? Because I could have prepared if you had said that. But anyway, let's.
folks that I told him that I was like, I don't believe folks knew that as much as what he thought. But the second thing though is that by naming it, right, we then open ourselves up for other folks to also share. So you see
Yep.
pretty quickly that you're not alone.
Yep.
And then after that, we can figure out what to do, right? And
Mm.
that sounds super simple, but there are so many companies and people, right, that are in a situation where they aren't exactly comfortable with where they are,
Yep.
but they don't name it. Nobody knows, and unfortunately, nothing really changes, because for most things, you're gonna need somebody or something to help you try to get through it. And going back to what we came here to talk about, community. You've got to be in community with people to
Yep.
be able to hold you, yeah, one, accountable, but two, also just to make sure that you understand that, like, you're not the only person that is experiencing
Mm.
whatever it is that we're talking about. Like, and there's nothing new under the sun. Whatever you're going through, that some version of that scenario has played out for somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and there are things that I'm confident we could discuss that would be
Mm-hmm.
helpful to you.
Yeah. And the thing is that the solutions that they gave me, I would have never thought to do it. One, because I didn't know it existed as a tool, but also I would have had too much shame about it. So not only did they give me information about the process, but they also helped me navigate the emotional process of working through that. And it became simple. It was just like, no, you just need to do that. Like, period. Like, that's
And
how
there
you can
shouldn't be any
solve this
shame.
problem. And then once you solve that piece, then come back, we're gonna chat again and see like what the next step is. And I'm like, oh, okay. I can do this because I'm talking to someone who has seen other people or themselves have gotten to the other side of that. And I think that that's one of the misnomers of community is
Yep.
that community only exists for celebration, but community exists to grieve with you. It
Absolutely.
exists to celebrate with you. It exists to teach you. It exists to correct you. It exists to chastise you. It exists to check you and say, you better than that. You could be doing this different. It exists to say, hey, you're not doing enough, right? Like there's more in you. You could be expanding. You could be doing this. That's too small. And I think in some ways, we've gotten away from that because those parts can feel hurtful. And especially if we've been hurt by community in other parts of our lives or other places in our lives, we'll hesitate to create that type of intimate community, not knowing that that's just as necessary as the celebration and the rah rah part.
I agree. And I think that again, if we're not intentional in this space, then you end up in a lot of people. It's not everybody, right? But you can end up in a place where there's a tremendous amount of shame about something that isn't shameful. And that thing for me is like really sad is that there are a lot of business owners specifically that like have a lot of shame about this thing or that thing in their business. And if they only understood that like they are far from being exceptional in this space, like there's a bunch of people that have this same problem. And if they could actually see all of who else, that is also trying to grow and scale companies and the problems that they're facing, a lot of times you zoom out from there and see, wow, like I'm actually doing better than I thought that I was. And at minimum, I shouldn't have any shame about this issue. I mean, if everything was going to go perfect in the business, then it just one, the journey wouldn't be much of a journey, right? But two, it's just not realistic. It's just like that. That's not what happens in life broadly, right? Like, so you shouldn't have shame when you're in a season where it isn't going exactly how you thought it was going to go, because that's a part of just what happens really for anybody in any circumstance. Like you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think what I'm realizing about community in this season is that community only works when I'm willing to be vulnerable. So if I'm only relying on other people to be vulnerable to me to pour out and help and help and help, that leads to resentment and even more isolation. Like I have to be equally as vulnerable as the other people in my community fit to work out right. And that I didn't know that was gonna be this hard. It's like it's
Well,
really is really difficult for me.
no, I mean it's difficult for everybody. I mean, I put myself in that same bucket. I mean, we started our company. I didn't. I mean, the only person that knew about any of our struggles was my co-founder, and we kept it to ourselves. I mean, there wasn't a whole bunch of people that we invited into the conversation, and there were a lot of different reasons for that. But probably the most significant of all of them was that we felt like we just shouldn't, right? In many ways, that it was our burden individually, and that should just be kind of how we moved through it. And it wasn't until we started to check in with folks that some real, like, now I look at it as fundamental things started to emerge in those conversations that allowed us to change our strategy or just change our attitude and move forward.
Yeah,
'Cause
that
A lot of this
attitude.
stuff,
Yeah,
a lot of this stuff is the
circle
attitude.
that.
A
Yeah,
lot of this stuff
circle
is
attitude. That hit me. That
a
did
lot
something
of
to
this
me.
stuff is a lot of this stuff in business is how you relate to the problem, right? It's not so much that the problem is changing or has all of these emotions. It's like how we relate to what the issue is, and reframing it. I think this is necessary, but like reframing what the problem is that you're staring at is very, very important, right? And I think any good entrepreneur, you have to be almost by reflex as you experience a challenge, still trying to see where the opportunity is in that challenge. If you're going to be the type of person that experiences a challenge and says, well, starts to wilt or kind of move in the opposite direction, this particular game is probably not for you, right? Because even when it doesn't make sense, you still have to have the attitude, well, okay, I didn't get the results with that last thing that I did, but if I could just do this, this, and that, that could be the thing that unlocks the door that I'm trying to kick down.
Yeah.
And we're having a whole different conversation
Yes.
quickly. Like we could be having a whole different discussion. And I really do believe, I mean, most companies, especially small businesses, are a deal or two away
Yes.
from making whatever happen. I'll say one other thing in this, and it's a practice that I have. I
Yes.
try to make everything, and I got this from my father. I try to make everything as simple as I can, right? So instead of like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and the business is having a hard time with traffic, like getting people to come into it. And the way that our conversation was going, it was like kind of with this idea of impossibility that you could really get anybody in the city to come to this place. And I paused and said, look, are we really accepting the reality that in a city of millions and millions and millions of people, that we can't go figure out how to get 25, 50, 100, 150 people to come in here every single day? Out of the millions of people that live here, there's no strategy that we could put together to get 50 people to walk in this thing. And when framed that way, it was like, well, no, I think I could do that. It's like, well, that's really the problem, right? The problem is about trying to, you actually can't get all of Atlanta to come to your business every day. You don't have the space, you don't have the inventory, like you don't have any of the things to be able to do that. You just need to get to your group of people every single day and get to your number, right? And like that's possible. So again, you've got to like take a step back and distill the problem down to the most simple form of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then attack that. Right. Any other form of engagement to me is a waste of energy, and frankly, it probably will leave you frustrated.
Yeah. Hold on. I got to get on my Jesse Jackson flow for a minute because now I heard two key words you said. So I heard animation and distillation. So if we get another little Asian in there, we about to have a whole little
I'll do
slogan.
my best. That was
I
all.
like it
I'll
though.
do my best.
What's funny, so this a random story. I lived in Chicago for a while. And so it would be random events at the Operation Push headquarters on the south side. And I went to the church that I don't know if he was a member or he used to just pop up there and be coming. So he would just randomly show up at times. And it will always be like basically like a pre-serve. It didn't matter what he was talking about. It could be about voting, it could be about anything, but it was always something that rhymed. So I've been carrying that with me now for like 15 years. But the distillation I think is really important because I recently had to do that. So at the time that we're filming this is like a week out, but I had to rebrand my whole company and the podcast. And how I did that was distilling it down to what are the most important parts of me? What do I offer the world that I think number one is sustainable, meaning that I could do it bootstrapping it with the least amount of money possible, right? Just in case I don't have a whole bunch of capital on hand. What can I do that is scalable, meaning I can grow this over time, again, with the least amount of capital until I can get over this hump. And then finally, what feels good to me? So, what's enjoyable? I don't want to do stuff, given how difficult everything else might be around me. I don't want to be miserable doing my work because then that impacts the other two pieces. It's not sustainable or scalable at that point. So when I distilled it down, I was like, you know what? Okay, I help people do this, 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 and this. Bet. All right, so let's go. Like, let's move it. And we just gonna rebrand, regroup, build from there. And that element of the journey, it was really like creating community with myself. Because it was like, why am I fighting myself with what I know needs to happen? I know that this part of my entrepreneurial journey with this company name and this company direction has ended. It's clear this is done. So you either gonna sit here and stew and mourn forever, or you gonna get up and you gonna move it along because time is
Yeah,
of the essence right now. Like we
yeah,
behind on some
yeah.
stuff.
And I think you're also identifying something else that's important just in the journey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is hard. This is going to be easier for me to say than I know it is to do. But I think you have to get yourself to this place. So what you're doing in your business is actually not that important. And I would even say how you're doing it is also not that important. The only thing that you really need to understand is like why you're doing it. And if
Come
you
on.
can understand why, what and how will change, right? You shouldn't be married to what or how, right? Like you might have to deliver whatever it is that you deliver in a different format than you originally thought. But like if you're settled on the why you're doing it, that's where like to me business is harder, right? If you feel if
Yeah.
you get to a place where the why isn't interesting for other people, people don't buy into your why as being important, at least in commerce,
Yeah.
that's a different thing. But like what or how, those are things that you have to be okay with saying, all right, look, I thought it was going to be something that we could do brick and mortar, but it feels like in order for us to deliver on the goal of connecting people, they really want that to happen virtually, right? So, okay, well, we're going to become a virtual, we're going to do the work every single day. We're going to
Yeah.
shift that to, so how is changing, and to a certain extent, I guess, what is changing too,
Yep.
but why did it change, right? I mean, then that to me was the thing that got, this principle was what got us through COVID. I mean, the business is called the Gathering Spot. We couldn't gather. The only thing that I could tell our team was, okay, it's not about trying to figure out why we're here. We know why we're here. We have to change what we're going to be doing every single day. And
Yeah.
uh, fortunately, we moved to doing some other things that were interesting for folks, but don't be the type of entrepreneur that is so married to how you're doing something
Yep.
that you refuse to change it. And then eventually the why you're doing it becomes compromised, and you think it was because of something that it really wasn't. Like the best
Yep.
businesses they change their distribution all the time, but they normally don't change the purpose for why they exist in the first place.
Yeah. And I think some of that is how how did you build your self-confidence before becoming an entrepreneur? That piece that piece gets missed a lot. And I talk to a lot of people, especially Black women. So I do like volunteer branding sessions, coaching sessions for, and it's usually group sessions for Black women. I've done about 5 or 6 of them over the past couple of years. And one of the things I talk to them about is like, because everybody is like, man, I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, yes, that's it. And I was like, you being an entrepreneur is not going to solve whatever your insecurities were when you work for someone else. Because if you start a business based on the emotion of shame, guilt, fear, disillusionment, that is going to color all of the decisions that you make in your business. So part of the
Yeah,
journey, because I didn't start generating revenue until maybe like year 5 of my company. And throughout that 5-year journey, it was me unlearning all of the shame and frustration of working for someone else so that I could carry joy, optimism, hope, freedom in what I put forward in my own company. And that I think has made the difference for how I've been able to handle when business is booming, how I've been able to handle with business being downturn, how I've been able to handle changing my customer, my target market, like all of those things color it. So if you were not fulfilled in your career, and so you say, I'm gonna start a business because I'm tired of it, that is coloring the decisions that you make in that phase of your journey. So check
yeah,
yourself if that's not the
yeah.
color that you want from the coloring box.
It still gets back down to me though, to like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Like, what's the real reason you want to be an entrepreneur? And
Mm.
if the real reason is because I want to be my own boss or anything that feels like it's that type of, like, that's not a good reason to do anything. I know sometimes it's talked about too, like, well, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to have financial freedom. Well, I mean, that you're unlikely to find financial freedom quickly
Literally.
as an entrepreneur, right? So like that's not
I had a
even,
lot more freedom when I was getting them
yeah,
biweekly checks.
yeah.
Just FYI.
I mean, like, so why you're the only thing that sustains an entrepreneur through the journey is why, like,
Mm-hmm.
like, and being rooted there. And to the confidence piece, I mean, look, I got to a place where I can't even sit here and tell you that even right now, I walk into every situation with the most confidence. The thing that I walk into every situation with is, to the greatest extent that I understand it, I only get a chance to do life one time. And I refuse to not try to do the thing that I really deeply care about, like because if I don't do that, then what I'm basically saying to me and everybody
Yeah.
is that it's okay for my dream to die so that I guess your dream can exist in the world. And I just can't live like that. So to me, it's not about like having confidence. It's about being resolved in that, like, I'm not going to allow the thing that I care about not to happen, and to allow my fear to serve, I guess, everybody else's interests and not the
Yeah.
thing that I actually want to do every single day. So and then over time, like, I guess the confidence becomes more legitimate.
Yeah.
But until then, like, you don't even have to have confidence. You just have to have, again, just a position that, like, I'm just not going to allow life to pass me by.
Yeah.
And for everybody else, whoever that is, to be
Yeah.
getting the things that they want to see accomplished, and I'm supposed to sit here and just be miserable. I
Yeah.
just no, I don't accept that as a way of being for me. So
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's funny because my like theme statement, I want to say it was probably now, well, now it's almost heading toward 2 years, but definitely like in the last 18 months. And I said this in my prayer time, is like, I am going to eat from the fruit of my own vineyard. So it's no longer acceptable for me to build and fertilize and water and plant and do all of the like making sure everything is right and everybody else is eating the fruit. And by the time I come back, it's nothing but scraps. Like I want to eat the fruit of my own vineyard. If I'm working this vineyard, I could share, right? But I need to eat of the fruit that I'm producing, whether that fruit is money, connections, just the success of completion, right? And a feeling of satisfaction that I got something done, that matters to me. And I think when we think about community, for a lot of us, we haven't gotten a chance to see reciprocity at work. For a lot of us, we've watched our parents overgive, or we've watched our parents just take, right? And when you haven't seen that balance and that true reciprocal relationship, it's hard to emulate that or even see the benefits of it and move past the fear of cultivating that. Because you got to like be vulnerable to give, and then it negotiate. Okay, are you going to give back? This is what I need. Okay, yes, you can only get this. Okay, well, what does that look like? That's a process too. And a lot of us, I think, struggle with that, especially as entrepreneurs.
I agree with you, and I think though that the thing that's important, again, it goes back to me to framing, right? You gotta, like, there are very few situations that I will leave feeling like I didn't get something out of it.
Mm.
Like, I get something out of basically everything that I spend time on, right? Because there's always something that you can draw. Yeah, the best entrepreneurs to me are folks that, like, can extract value out of even situations where you feel like there is none, right? Like, you have to be a person that, like, no matter what it is, even the things that feel stupid, like, start to position you start to look at them and be like, wait, why was that not helpful to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that becomes a pattern that you're then able to go and identify. And so I don't like learning that is important to me. So, again, like, I don't look at anything and be like, have this idea of like, that didn't serve me. It
Mm-hmm.
might not have advanced like today's interest,
It,
but it will advance
yeah,
tomorrow's interest. I mean, I'll
it's
give
in
you a
your
quick example.
toolkit, like you have it now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, I'll give you a quick example, right? So, like, when we started TGS, I would go to, I mean, everything at every event, right? And you would have folks that would say, well, like, ain't nobody really gonna be there. Like, why are you spending time, you know, going to this or going to that where there's no,
Yeah.
and like, what it was doing over time was allowing me to practice, right? So even the room, I look at it like any artist that you appreciate now, probably performed in a room with 5 people at some point, right? But like to get to being great, they had to have all those experiences where the crowd wasn't hyped, right? The crowd wasn't interested in seeing them. That they had to go build a skill set to go be interesting to people. So you could look at it and be like, oh, I just did a show and like, there was nobody there and that was a waste of time. Or you could look at it like, hey, I just did a show and no, there wasn't a lot of people there, but like I learned about stage presence. I learned how to navigate a difficult crowd. I practiced my craft generally. And so like for me talking about TGS, I'm almost a decade in. I've done it so many times and it's not going to be amazing every single time. Don't get me wrong. But like my zone of being okay is pretty wide, right? Because I have talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. I've learned what resonates with people. I've learned what does not resonate with people.
Yep.
And I needed those waste of time experiences in order to figure that out.
Yeah. No, I agree. I call that working the departments. So especially for solopreneurs and folks with very small teams, we're all drawn to certain departments in our company. And it's usually those that match like our skill set. So for me, HR is my background. So I love the HR side, right? Or service delivery. When I get to do trainings, I don't like the finance side. That's not my thing. I used to not like marketing and sales. I ain't never did that in my life. So when I have to do those things, whether it's attending a conference to try to get new leads or following up to make sure that I'm keeping track of expenses, because those aren't normally my departments and that's not my skill set, I'll feel like those are wastes of time. But they're not, because number one, it's helping me to understand the workflow of my business. That helps me to improve processes. It helps me to know how to better staff my company because I've seen it. So I know what I now need to look for in a person who can own it. But it also helps me to understand the rhythm of the business. So sometimes when we're so busy working in the business, we can't work on it because we don't know the business for real. And so I just want to encourage anybody who, again, is a solopreneur or who runs a small team. I know it can be overwhelming, especially when you got to do the tasks that you don't like. But you being intimately connected to all parts of your business, especially at first to understand the flow, is going to help it run smoother later. Because to what Ryan said, like if you've ever gone to a gathering spot event, like you can see where it's like he understands what's happening right in the business because like he said he just touched the business. So even if you're not always owning that piece, you have an awareness so that you can at least set standards for what ideal should look like because you know it so well.
To me, if you're too big to do anything inside of your company, then like I don't know if it's the right company, right? So
Come
this
on.
whole again is framing, right? Like, oh, I don't like to do this or I don't like to do that. That's fine. Like you can acknowledge that, I guess, to a certain extent, but then you have to quickly pivot to like, look, you can't convince me certain things inside of our company because like I've done that job, right? I know what you do, right? So even though I like certain things better than other things, like
Yep.
I know exactly how long it takes to set up an event, and I know it from experience. Do I like moving tables and chairs? I
Right.
can't say that it's the top activity. I don't wake up in the morning with that as a top activity that I want to do. It's a very important thing in the business, and I appreciate and respect the folks on our team that do have that responsibility. But because I did it for years, there's nothing that you can tell me about any part of that. We stack our chairs 12 high, right? Like you can't do any, like that's the most efficient way to do that. You do less, you're going to run out of space and storage. If you do
Yep.
more, the piles are too high on the follow,
It,
right? So I can, like, you have to know you have to
yep.
know and not, I think, again, it's attitude. You can't walk into a conversation or to an assignment that you have already with the position that like I don't like doing this. I'm just gonna get
Mm-hmm.
through it. Like, you should look at it like when I hire somebody to do this, I will have done it so many times that
Yeah.
no one can tell me about it. And
Yep.
so yes, while today might not be fun, tomorrow will be a lot better because
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to have any surprises inside of the company. So I mean, I work on this a lot. I don't want to sit here and act like I have mastered
Yeah.
my own, like even my own thoughts, but I do check myself on a regular basis to make sure, like, especially in business, that when you're talking about a problem, well, most of the time for you to have a problem, that means that there's something that happened in the business that like has created this issue. Well, at one point, I didn't even know if this business was a reality, right? So the idea that I have even the opportunity to have a problem,
Exactly.
I can't be sad about this problem. The problem is the thing that I asked for in this. I'm not
Come on.
saying that it's pleasant, right? But if you would have gone to me 10 years ago and said, hey, this business will work, right? But you're going to have to go through this issue in order to get to the other side. I would have been like, cool, sign me up, right? Like, I'm like, no problem. So I can't get to that point and then be like, I mean, these problems, like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Like, I wanted these issues and,
Yeah.
and would have taken them. I think we're talking about entrepreneurship, but you take the same principle outside of it. People will pray to get a job, like be trying to do anything to get an opportunity.
Right.
Get the
Right.
opportunity, and then be on the phone a month later, being like,
Right.
"I can't
I hate
believe you
this
took."
job.
It's like you got to keep perspective on, like, hey,
Yeah.
30 days ago, this
Right.
opportunity was dope. Like,
Right. You was
so
running literally doing laps around your house when they said, "Here go the offer."
call. And so now the problem. So like you have to try to like zoom out and
Yeah.
understand that yes, there are challenges, but those challenges are not things that should be overwhelming you to the point
Yeah.
to where your heart is out of it. And if your heart is out of it, life's short. Do something else, right?
Period.
If you can really be honest with yourself and say, this isn't just me not liking this issue or not liking this season. I don't like this.
Right.
My advice is to do something else because
Right.
there are a lot of ways to make a dollar. Some of the wealthiest people I know, they ain't started any companies, right? They just a
Right.
lot of them have just been in the right opportunity and
Exactly.
outside of other organizations. So there's a lot of ways to make a dollar. You have to get to a place of understanding what you care about.
It's
Well,
funny because I have like mantras, themes, whatever you want to call it. But man, in this season, it's like I will not let this season take me out. Like there are days where I wake up and my body is literally in pain from the stress of trying to figure out what the beep beep
yeah.
beep is going on. But I'm like, this season not gonna take me out. Like I might crawl to the finish line of this season. I might literally be like hacking, coughing, like literally belly crawling my way to the end, but this season will not take me out because if I could get through everything else that I've been dealing with and somehow me and God together figure out a way to get through all of that, and then I get to here and be like, well, all right, I guess I'm gonna just crash out. For me, now if we think about community, it's not even just me, it's about all of the generations before me that worked they behind off so that I could have a seed of intelligence, faith, wisdom, discipline, whatever to do this. So I'm not just letting myself down. I'm letting all of those folks down too. I'm letting down the generations that's gonna
Yeah.
come
And
after
you're
me.
letting yourself down, right? Again,
Yeah.
go back, just put yourself 2 years ago. And if someone would have come to you and said, hey, okay, so I have a deal. The business will work, but you're going to go through 9 months, a year, where it's going to be ridiculous. Like you're going to be stressed out for most of the entire year. But the business eventually will work out,
Yeah.
right? Like it'll be successful. It'll accomplish all the things that you wanted to accomplish. Like all of that happens, but you have to agree to a year of
Yeah.
just or two or three
Yeah.
or five.
Yeah.
Most of us in that season would have said, I mean, that doesn't sound great, but
I
all right,
uh-huh.
I'll take the like if I know that this thing will work. So like that's the sort of faith
Come
that you
on.
have to have as an entrepreneur. I'm
That's
not
true.
doing this. This is not a random thing for me. I know that this thing like it exists for a reason and I'm doing it for a reason. So if you accept that, then the idea that there's going to be adversity is just a part of the process, right? So like
Absolutely.
uh, zoom out again, like seriously, like zoom out and ask yourself if you would take that. Now, if the answer to that question is, nah, I wouldn't have, even back then, I would not have accepted this. Life's short. We should talk
Right.
about what
You might need to
options
find you something
exist.
else to do.
Like we should talk about what options exist at this moment, right? But like, if you would have taken the deal 2 years ago,
Stick with it.
there's a reason why you're still in the game, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, what is this? But I also would have taken at any point, if you told me I had to go sit down for a year of just ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
but I would have like shooed that off as a thing. I'd be like, yeah, of course I'll take a year. Like, cool.
Yeah.
If I could build
Because
a
a
business.
year in a 15-year run, like that's nothing. It's funny you say that because everything that I'm doing now 2 years ago didn't even exist. And I was telling myself that this is a couple months ago. Because again, I was crazy. Listen, but I tell you this year, like it's been some moments, fam. Like this
Yeah,
ain't no joke.
yeah.
So what I told myself was like, yeah, you struggling, but look at what you created, even if it's a small seed. Like 2 years ago, none of this existed. All of the stuff that you're doing literally by yourself, because I couldn't afford it, I had no step period. So everything that was happening in my business was like all me. It's like, do you realize that like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you never, even with this podcast, this is a crazy story. Then we're going to go to the last question. Somebody, it was somebody I went to church with. This was back in undergrad. So I'll be 40 next year. So this is like 20 years ago. Back then was like, you should do radio. You should do radio. Back then, podcasts and stuff ain't exist. So it was like to get on the radio. How do I do that? No, I could never do that. 20 years later now, I'm running a podcast, which technically could be like a form of radio. And it's like, yeah, back then you could have never seen a vision for this. So who cares if this is like a little bit of a struggle? Okay, you got to learn the platform to use. You got to learn how to control the mic, do this work. So look at what you've now created and
Yep.
what you have the chance to grow. So I
Yeah.
think sometimes we look so far at how far we might be from what we think is the ideal that we don't realize how far we've come from that starting point of like, yeah, but you're like 80% of the way there. Yeah, you got 20% left, and that 20% might be hard, but you gonna forget about the 80? Like that's a big
Well,
old 80.
yeah, and I know we're running time. We're just real quick on this point. I think this is semi-important. When you have to overcome something, especially in business,
Mm-hmm.
you are building a muscle that many other people do not have. And so it actually becomes, this is why mindset is important. That actually becomes an advantage in business because you'll see this all the time. A company will start, they'll raise a bunch of money, they never figured out their business plan, adversity hits, and they don't know what to do. Right? It's
Yep.
like they're in cold water and they've never been in those waters before.
Yeah.
We survived COVID because I had already been in terrible times as a business. So like it looked like what that looked like. So like I already had a muscle for like I knew how to operate when business wasn't coming in the door. Right. Like
Yeah.
I knew how like what you needed to now again, circumstances were different, but like the problem wasn't I mean it was there's a lack of business. Right. And
Yeah.
like I knew how to
That's
live
the
there.
distillation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know how to live there. So you can relate to challenge as, oh my, this is horrible, or you can relate to challenge as like, yeah, this is uncomfortable right now, but like what I'm building is a muscle group that like my peers don't have, and
Yeah.
eventually, at some point, you are going to have to like everybody has to either this card has to get played. Like you have to either you got to show that you know what to do when it gets ugly, and you'll be surprised how many people fold because they've never.
Yep.
And it's hard to build in wartime, right? Like
Come on.
it's very
Come
difficult.
on.
You don't know how to like. You don't know how this isn't a muscle group that you have.
Come on.
It's very difficult to start like it's kind of like trying to figure out how to be healthy if you've only been sick, right? Like it's,
Exactly. Or learning how to swim when you already in the ocean. It's like, no, baby, you needed you
you
needed the
needed to
kiddie
invest
pool
time.
skills long before
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's not great to be in the middle of the ocean and then be trying to figure out how to get to shore and swim for the first time. It's like, no, you need to when you hit the water, the only people that are making it to shore are the people who put time in before that moment,
Period.
knowing
Period.
how to get there. So relate to it differently. Like relate to the challenge as a part of a process and as an advantage. Because I'm telling you, so many people in business especially,
Yeah.
they don't know how to live in that space.
Mm-mm.
And it eventually will get
Nope.
them. Right. So
Yeah.
and it's just the truth. Like some of the biggest companies, some of the companies we grew up on, those leaders didn't know how to
At all.
oh,
I ain't even gonna spill nobody tea, but all I'm gonna say is you right because I coach and train them leaders, and this actually leads to the final question: is like, what do you need to know you individually as a leader to be able to be ready for what's next? And that's different for every person. What do you need? And a lot of leaders don't have that answer and are afraid to explore that for themselves. So I'll ask you, and I'll part on this thought.
I,
What do you need for the next phase of what you believe is your journey as a leader?
um I need endurance. I need resolve. I don't need to have the answers to the test before the test comes.
Mm,
I need to have the resolve that no matter what the test is, that I will have the endurance to get through whatever that season is. So like, I'm less concerned about what the new thing is, but like, am I going to be prepared to attack it, whatever it is, right? I think the folks that are trying to like try to game plan every scenario,
mm-hmm.
sure. I mean, you just can't, right? I mean, they're coming from. So the best thing that you can do is build a set of tools and a way that you kind of approach any challenge that comes and look at it from the perspective of like, yeah, I don't really care what the
Yeah,
action is. Like,
yeah.
I'm going to I have I have a type of constitution that like I'm going to get through whatever that is. So yeah, I don't spend a bunch of time obsessing about like, am I prepared for a weather event or like for like I don't know what direction the next thing is that's going to bother me is going to be.
Yeah.
I'm like I'm trying to be like in training so that like it don't really matter. Like it can come by land, air, or sea. Like it doesn't really impact
I
much
like
me.
that. I like that
Right.
because Constitution. Here we go. So I knew we was gonna make it to our third word. Here we go. So we got animation, distillation, and Constitution. I'm with that. We got our Jesse
Yeah, no,
Jackson
yeah. If we got our three,
trilogy
yeah,
ready right
no,
here.
but that word cost like being able to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, do like do I have the constitution to like is it in me?
Mm.
And if the answer is no, that's fine, right? But like then you
Right.
have to start to get prepared for so when you someone were to ask you again, I follow the question you were asking, but it's like I don't I don't care what the challenge is. Like that's not even the interesting part. Like
Yeah. But that is the answer though. Like I think for you to know, I just need to be ready. Right? Like readiness is a thing. We
yeah.
ignore the power of readiness, and I know that'll probably take us on a whole other podcast episode. But endurance, that's a form of readiness. Cause
Oh, I think
everybody
it's the
ain't
only form in business that really matters, right?
yeah.
Like I don't really. A lot of people think of like business is about how smart you are or like how
Mm-mm.
I don't think I think it's like it's marathon work. Like
Come on.
can you endure the process
Mm.
with and endure it with some joy? Like can you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
through? Can you still figure out how to like call your mama and hang out with your friends even
Yeah.
though your business ain't doing well? You ain't got no money.
Come on.
Or
Come on. Come on.
like bus-
Come on.
can you compartmentalize you know in that way and like still that it's a endurance race. It's like yeah, you on mile 10 and like you have a
Yeah.
cramp in your leg. Can you like do you have the type of constitution that's like, well, I finish races, right? Like that's what if I started this race, I'm gonna finish the race. So I mean, again, I think the people who approach it with respect, like approach it differently, I don't necessarily understand it, because Yeah, I mean, game plan for what? It's this is about a marathon work. So
Yes, that hit me anyway. I got to take some time to process that. So I'm just letting you know I'm probably gonna cry a little bit once once this meeting finishes because it, like I said, it that is the level of affirmation that I have to have for myself in this season. That it's like there is another side. So
absolutely.
please let the people know how they can get in touch with you, how they can watch your journey, and how they can connect with you.
We're at the gathering spots on everything. I talk about the business a good bit online, spot on RW. Connect with us online, gatheringspot.club. But I appreciate it. Like, we're a reflection of a lot of good people, you included, that like come
Thank
together to connect and to have the sort of conversations. And it's not all business all the time, right? Business is
you.
increasingly social. But connect with us, right? We could be helpful, love to do that. If we can introduce you to somebody, we'd love to figure out how to do that. This thing only works because we have decided as a community that we want it to work. So please
Yeah.
give us a shot.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan. All right, y'all. We're going to catch you in the next one. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. See y'all.